Oh, Melvin, don't talk to me. You use your soprano voice, will you?
Here's a soprano voice in Glenn Leonard.
No, I tell you what. This is Melvin Franklin.
Values. I'm not trying to impress different people because I don't care about that anymore. What I care about is my true intentions, and that is to be one of the Temptations and make all the people happy through our music.
The disturbing truth about the murder of Melvin Franklin lies behind the smooth, thunder-deep voice that anchored the Temptations and made generations stop and listen.
Melvin, in my opinion, was the heart and soul of the group. When I think of the Temptations, I think of Melvin.
But what they will not tell you is how he spent his final years drowning in mystery, medication, and manipulation. The official report said he died of heart failure, a quiet exit after years of illness. But the rumors said otherwise.
I remember specifically the day that he could not finish a tour. Melvin had a sore or something on his arm, and it would not heal.
That someone close to him may have pulled the strings, that the sickness was not natural, that his death was not peaceful. It was planned, and the deeper you dig, the darker it gets.
Like that, Melvin died at Cedars-Sinai Hospital.
Yeah.
And we all got to go and see him. And it just looked like his heart was broken, to me.
The date was February 23rd, 1995. The world woke up to headlines announcing the death of David Melvin English, known globally as Melvin Franklin, the legendary bass vocalist of the Temptations. According to the official version of the story, Melvin passed away due to heart failure. Medical reports suggested it was tied to complications from rheumatoid arthritis and years of steroid and immunosuppressive medication. That version was quietly accepted by the media, printed in newspapers, and passed along with no real resistance. But many of those closest to Melvin knew there was something deeply unsettling about how he left this world. What that clip did not tell the public was what friends and family were already whispering. Melvin had been improving. Despite his long-standing battle with autoimmune disease, he had reportedly been stabilizing. Close friends spoke to him on the phone just days before, and according to them, Melvin was making plans to travel again, to re-engage with music, and possibly return to mentorship. One relative, who remained anonymous for decades, shared how Melvin was laughing, eating well, and even talking about writing a book. He was not a man waiting for death. He was preparing to live again. Now here is where it gets troubling. Melvin was reportedly being cared for at home under what was described as light supervision. But as his health began to improve, some individuals from his inner circle allegedly became more involved, not less. It is unclear if this was motivated by concern or control, but the sudden shift raised eyebrows. One former associate claimed that a new caretaker had been placed in his home weeks before the incident. Someone who was not a registered nurse, but had access to everything. Then came the moment that shook the entire house. Melvin collapsed. It happened suddenly. No dramatic lead-up, no warning, just a crash, a struggle to breathe, a desperate attempt to revive him, and a rushed drive to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He died a few hours later. But here is the detail that many found strange. No emergency 911 call has ever been made public. There were also no verified eyewitness accounts of what exactly occurred between the collapse and his hospital arrival. And there was more. Melvin had financial assets, royalties, publishing rights, even personal memorabilia from the Temptations' prime era. Documents show that in his final months, Melvin was reassessing his legal documents, his will, his estate, and who had access to what. A friend once stated that Melvin had become suspicious of certain individuals who had been circling him, offering help but acting secretive, and in some cases, attempting to isolate him from longtime friends. There were even whispers of Melvin wanting to distance himself from someone within the group's legacy, someone who allegedly did not want Melvin to speak publicly about old financial arrangements. The deeper you go, the more it feels like Melvin was not just a man who passed away quietly. He was a man possibly being silenced before he could speak. Now, whether or not this theory holds legal weight is another matter entirely. But fans, music historians, and insiders all agree Melvin Franklin's death left more questions than answers. And those questions still echo to this day. The official story reads simple. Too simple. Melvin Franklin, the booming bass voice behind one of the most legendary Motown groups of all time, passed away on February 23, 1995, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. The cause of death was respiratory failure following a series of seizures, reportedly tied to complications from his battle with rheumatoid arthritis and the medications he was taking. But when people close to Melvin started asking questions, the answers didn't line up. Here's where things get suspicious. Melvin's health had been deteriorating, yes, but not to the point where death was expected. Multiple people claimed he was in good spirits just days before his death. He was allegedly looking forward to upcoming Temptations performances and had even spoken about future projects. So, when news broke that he had suffered a seizure and slipped into a coma before dying, some questioned whether it was really just the illness. Let's break it down. Melvin had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in the early 1980s, a condition that left him in constant pain. For years, he endured intense treatments, including cortisone injections, to manage the pain so he could still perform. But cortisone, especially in high doses over extended periods, can have devastating side effects, including depression, weakened immune systems, and even neurological impacts. But those close to him said there were signs that didn't point to just a medical collapse. According to a former associate who visited him in the hospital, Melvin looked bruised and not right. These claims were never verified officially, but they linger. Then there's the issue of timing. Melvin had been involved in a few legal and business disputes around the time of his death, particularly surrounding the Temptations' name, royalties, and reunion plans. Just months prior, he had been pulled into a heated discussion around money and who would control the branding rights if he became too ill to tour. And this is where the rumors start to heat up. In the early 1990s, Melvin Franklin's health was deteriorating, but he didn't want anyone to know how bad it really was. On stage, he gave it everything. Off stage, he was fading. By 1994, the multiple sclerosis diagnosis was no longer a secret to those close to him. He was also battling severe diabetes, and his weight had dropped dramatically. In February 1995, things took a sharp turn. Melvin was hospitalized in Los Angeles after falling into a diabetic coma. But this wasn't just a sudden drop in sugar levels. According to former band affiliates, something about that night didn't sit right. Franklin's wife, Kimberly, was the one who made the emergency call. But insiders claim she wasn't the only person there that night, and wasn't even the one who had been with Melvin earlier in the evening. Melvin's coma lasted only a few hours, but when he awoke, he was never quite the same. His speech was slurred. His eyes looked distant. According to close friend Larry Cotton, it was like a different person woke up in Melvin's body. Then, just 6 days later, he was dead. The official cause? Heart failure. But here's where things start to twist. According to multiple sources, including hospital staff who spoke off the record, Franklin had traces of strong sedatives in his system. That detail was never publicly released, but rumors spread in the Los Angeles music circle like wildfire. And if sedatives were involved, who gave them to him? Some fingers pointed back at Kimberly, his wife, not just for the sedatives, but for everything. Multiple people close to Melvin claimed he had been trying to change his will in the weeks leading up to his death. He allegedly wanted to redirect his estate toward his children and remove certain certain individuals, one of them being Kimberly, from his assets. And then he was gone. Was it a coincidence? A tragic ending from years of illness? Or did someone want him silenced before he could make that change? Theories multiplied, and Melvin's family didn't speak much publicly, but the whispers only got louder in private. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all. Who really benefited from Melvin Franklin's death? Melvin Franklin was laid to rest in Inglewood Park Cemetery. The world mourned. His fans paid tribute. And behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. Within just 3 months of his death, a legal battle broke out over Franklin's estate. Not just between his wife and children, but also a third party, an unknown limited liability company registered weeks before his death. The name? Blue Vibe Holdings. Blue Vibe Holdings was allegedly created to manage the publishing rights for upcoming re-releases of Temptations music. But here's the catch. Melvin never signed off on it. And it wasn't just about Melvin's voice. He had partial ownership over several Temptations classics, including I Can't Get Next to You, Just My Imagination, and Cloud 9. That catalog was projected to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, especially with the rise of CDs and greatest hits collections in the mid-90s. So where did the money go? A forensic accountant hired by one of Franklin's sons allegedly discovered over $400,000 in royalties diverted to offshore accounts connected to Blue Vibe Holdings. But the LLC was registered under a name that would send chills through anyone familiar with Franklin's personal struggles. A relative of Kimberly's. The Franklin family tried to take it to court, but the case mysteriously stalled. Witnesses refused to testify. Documents went missing. Even Melvin's former attorney died suddenly in 1997 under what some called odd circumstances. Was this paranoia, or was there a deeper cover-up at play? And then came another strange turn. A former nurse at the hospital where Melvin died came forward. In a 2004 interview, recorded but never aired, she made a bold claim. She later claimed Melvin's vitals were stabilizing and that she left the room for less than 3 minutes. When she returned, he had flatlined. Was it a natural collapse or something else? She ended the tape with one haunting sentence, and yet he did.
I think of Melvin because my first shows were in Japan, and Melvin took me under his wing, told me what to do.
At the height of their fame, the Temptations weren't just a group, they were a movement. And at the center of it all was David Ruffin, the charismatic voice behind hits like Am Not Too Proud to Beg and My Girl. But fame does something strange to people, especially when one man's shadow starts stretching across 5.
His father, and physically labor I have built Motown with my hands.
David Ruffin, feeling untouchable, made a bold demand. Let's change the name to David Ruffin and the Temptations.
David Ruffin wanted it. David Ruffin and the Temptations.
Yes, he did.
He didn't get away with it, but Diana Ross did.
Yeah, well, you know.
It wasn't a suggestion. It was a power move, a way to crown himself king.
Success can act as a very strong aphrodisiac, you know, and when you are a group, you have to move and think as one unit. You cannot have 5 guys going, 5 different directions.
Otis and the others weren't having it. They remembered what made the group work: harmony, balance, unity. Giving one man top billing? That wasn't the Temptations anymore. That was a ticking time bomb. Behind the scenes, Ruffin was missing shows, arriving late in limos, and battling personal demons with drugs and ego. And in June 1968, the group made the painful decision. David Ruffin was out.
Okay, my question is to Otis. Why was David Ruffin fired from the Temptations?
Well, you see, when we first started out, we made a vow that we would not change.
But here's the twist. He wasn't the only one with solo dreams. Eddie Kendricks, the falsetto heart of the Temptations, wasn't just a voice. He was the group's style architect, managing their wardrobe with precision.
Eddie Kendricks was in charge of the Temptations' wardrobe, so he worked in conjunction with Charlie Atkins and Maurice when we started to do the sophisticated ones like the Copacabana.
Did you love?
But behind the glamour, tension brewed. In 1971, frustrated by creative clashes and control issues, Eddie walked away. His solo hit, Keep On Truckin', lit up the charts, but the spotlight didn't last. Fame faded, and so did his place in the front row of history. Paul Williams, the heart of the group, never pursued solo fame, but his internal battles were the loudest. Depression and alcohol took over. He died tragically by suicide in 1973. Dennis Edwards, Ruffin's replacement, also tried going solo after his time with the group. His voice was fire. His debut album, Don't Look Any Further, was a hit, but staying consistent without the Temptations machine behind him was tough. One by one, they chased the light, but none could hold it like they did as a unit. When Ruffin tried to rename the group, he wasn't just asking for a title change, he was asking to rewrite the group's DNA. That moment became the breaking point, and a cautionary tale for every other member who dreamed of going solo. Because the truth was harsh but simple. Without the Temptations, most of them couldn't survive the spotlight alone. Behind that unforgettable bass voice, behind the legendary smile, Melvin Franklin carried a weight that few fans ever knew. This chapter isn't about scandal for the sake of shock. It's about pain, pride, and the hidden wars that shaped a Motown icon. Melvin Franklin was fighting for his life while still performing for the world. He suffered from seizures. He was diabetic. He took medications that weakened his immune system. But you wouldn't know it watching him on stage, because Melvin never made his pain a performance. There were no press tours about his illness, no interviews crying out for sympathy. He stayed silent. But that silence led to rumors. Fans whispered, "Is he on drugs?" Others asked, "Why does he disappear between tours?" What the public didn't see was a man physically breaking down in private, all while holding up one of the greatest vocal groups in history. Despite being the soul of the Temptations' harmonies, Melvin Franklin died without the fortune you'd expect. Financial hardships hit him hard. Some say bad management robbed him. Others blame the notorious Motown contracts that gave artists hits, but not wealth, for all the platinum records. Melvin Franklin reportedly lived his final years struggling to pay bills. He wasn't alone. Dozens of Motown artists from his era faced similar fates, used by the machine, then forgotten. Was it mismanagement? Was it exploitation? The answer lies somewhere in between the record deals and the fine print. The Temptations were more than a band. They were a battlefield, internal beef, creative disagreements, power struggles. Melvin Franklin, though often seen as the group's rock, was not immune. He clashed with members over leadership and the future of the group, and those tensions weren't just private. Fans noticed abrupt lineup changes, tour promotions that mysteriously removed certain members, and interviews laced with carefully chosen words and awkward glances. Melvin may not have been the loudest voice in the room, but when he pushed back, it meant something, especially when the person across from him was Otis Williams. Otis Williams, the last surviving original member, led the group for decades.
Friend.
Otis Williams, ladies and gentlemen.
He is the leader, founder, and backbone of the Temptations.
No, wrong, no, him.
But that leadership came at a cost. Sources close to the group suggest that Melvin and Otis didn't always see eye to eye. Behind closed doors, they butted heads over pay cuts, tour decisions, even how tribute shows should be organized. Melvin reportedly felt that loyalty wasn't being returned, while Otis viewed it as business. Melvin saw it as betrayal. Fans have long debated whether Otis's version of the Temptations truly honored Melvin's legacy. And even in tribute specials, Melvin's contributions are sometimes overshadowed. Like so many black musicians of the 60s and 70s, Melvin Franklin learned the hard way. The music industry doesn't always pay what it owes. Melvin was reportedly caught up in legal disputes about royalties, how much he was owed, how much was missing, and who even owned the Temptations brand. These weren't just minor misunderstandings. They were full-on battles that exposed the industry's dirty side. Backroom contracts, shady management, and the reality that legacy doesn't always mean financial security. Fame has a way of breaking even the strongest spirits. Melvin Franklin was deeply private, but the lights, the tours, the cameras, they didn't care. He dealt with anxiety, isolation, pressure to keep smiling, even while in pain. One former tour member recalled, Melvin would step off stage, collapse from exhaustion, then smile again the next night. Nobody knew what he was carrying. When Melvin Franklin passed away in 1995, the tributes poured in, but the drama didn't stop. Family members reportedly clashed with group representatives over how Melvin should be honored. Who should speak? Who should be allowed to use his name? Who should profit from his memory? To this day, some fans believe Melvin's role in the Temptations has been minimized. He wasn't just the bass guy. He was the heartbeat, the foundation, and maybe that's why his story, his real story, isn't told enough. Melvin Franklin's controversies weren't loud. They didn't scream from headlines. They whispered from courtrooms, dressing rooms, and hospital beds. A silent storm, hidden behind a legendary voice. Melvin Franklin died on February 23, 1995, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was just 52. The official cause? Heart failure, brought on by a series of violent seizures. But those who really knew Melvin understood that it wasn't sudden. It was slow, brutal, and maybe even avoidable. Years of relentless touring had taken their toll. In 1978, Melvin was kidnapped at gunpoint in Los Angeles, shot at, and left deeply shaken. He survived, but he was never quite the same. Add to that a lifetime of corticosteroids and anti-seizure meds for his rheumatoid arthritis, and you had a man in constant quiet agony performing like nothing was wrong. Yet, behind the booming bass and the electrifying stage presence, his body was quietly breaking down. When he collapsed that February, the damage had already been done. Doctors tried to revive him. They failed. His funeral was small, private, Forest Lawn Memorial Park. No national headlines, no Motown parade. Just close friends, family, and the last living pieces of the group he helped build. Otis Williams later said, "He was the anchor. When he left, something left with him." Melvin Franklin was never the frontman. He didn't beg for the spotlight. But without him, the Temptations' sound, its soul, would have fallen apart. He was the concrete beneath the harmony. But in the end, questions linger. Why was his health allowed to spiral for so long? Why were there no major tributes, no grand send-off for a man so vital to American music? And why, even now, does his death feel quieter than it should?
Yeah, I was there for all of that. And I remember specifically the day that he could not finish a tour. Melvin had
Some say it was just time. Others believe Melvin Franklin deserved more, and maybe he did. That will be all for now. Goodbye.